Shabbat Shalom. Happy New Year. As we welcome this new secular year, we've really seen so much challenge over the last year. It's been really quite a year. I've heard from many different people expressing this thought. So much adversity and all the political turmoil, and obviously since October 7th, for us, the Jewish people in Israel, and that Shabbat that they're now calling in Israel the Black Shabbat, the war in Gaza and the rise in anti-Semitism and the war in Ukraine. And we look ahead and unsure what to expect with what is coming before us in Israel and Gaza, in Ukraine and Russia, and of course a very big election looming here in the United States. And really, as human beings on this planet, at this moment in time, at this crossroads, maybe we say it all the time, but maybe it feels more real than ever. With all of these forces that seem to be pulling humanity and all of us in all these different directions, the particularism and the nationalism and identity politics and all the different forces that are active in our world. The big question, how do we proceed forward? How do we find a way forward where everything is unclear and murky? So we'd like to turn to our parsha today, and the moment that began our second triennial reading, when Moses is called by God. And it's worthwhile to think about the context of this moment. Moses is 80 years old, and we notice because we know he dies at 120, and they traveled for 40 years in the desert. So we do the math backwards, and we see he's 80 years old. And he's a shepherd at this point in his life, and long ago he was a prince in Egypt. And he's being asked to do something very difficult. He's being asked to gather a nation of slaves with whom he felt a kinship 40 years before that, or even longer, and to take them out of Egypt and lead them to the land of milk and honey, and to bring something to them to also go get through this difficult situation that they are in. And so as Moses is bowing down to God in this beautiful moment that we read this morning, that Charles read for us, where we say, "Take off your shoes, for this is holy ground," the moment of revelation, the most powerful revelation in all of our scriptures, knowing that Moses must address all the injustices and God must address the injustices, and the people have to go free. And so God really, in the beginning of this, gives what I think is the essence of all of the teaching and of this long speech that becomes God trying to convince Moses, it's okay, you can do this. But before that, he gives Moses two images to work with, and I think they work through everything else. And so first God says, "I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob." So God was saying to Moses and then to the Jewish people as he would communicate to them, you come from somewhere. You feel alone in this moment, and the people had become very unrooted. They were just a people of slaves, and they held on to something. And God was saying, you might have forgotten who you are. You think you're just some people, but there's a story that you're a part of. And the story is the story of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And there's a history behind you, and there's a whole path that takes you to where you are now. You're not just floating around. And so he said, tell the people of Israel that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is calling out to them once again, that you have a spiritual source. You belong somewhere. You're not meant to be what you are right now. And then you're going to return to this land of milk and honey that God gave to those before. And there's a whole world of traditions and an old wisdom that's there for you to walk in. It's yours. So right, the Midrash says that there were some traditions that the people still held on to. They had Hebrew names, they spoke some Hebrew, some dress, but they'd forgotten almost completely what it meant to actually live in that way. All that wisdom, they just had all over the years of slavery had been forgotten. So it's time to remember and to wake up to who they were and to use that for what they needed. And this continues throughout everything that happens afterwards. And Moses is really a teacher to them throughout all that comes afterwards about who they are. Right, they wear the techelet on their tzitzit, the blue, because that was a royal color, probably more purple back then. And it's just to keep reminding them, you're not the slaves, you're a royal people, you're a people of God. Just remember this. And we too, Jews in America, maybe many people in this world have become unrooted, no longer have roots, and remember who we are. And so we also need that sense of, to really embrace a new beginning, you have to know where you come from. And also to have wisdom of how to navigate a difficult time. And the wisdom, even with all of our technology, there is something to be learned through thousands of years of tradition and of seichel, right? What's seichel? We have many different words for wisdom in Judaism, but seichel is the kind of wisdom you need to navigate a difficult time. So we need roots, but that's not the end of it. Because then Moses then asked God, well, the people are going to ask me, who are you? And God says, well, tell the people, Eheye, I am, is taking you out of Egypt. And then he elaborates and he says, Eheye asher eheye, I will be that I will be. So what does that mean, I will be that I will be? There's a teaching by Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdichev. It says, God was saying, you are never going to know who I am, because whatever you think I am, I'm already something else. Don't try and put me into a box. I'm ever evolving. I'm ever dynamic. The moment you think of me, I'm already something else. I'm infinite. And so God was saying, yes, I'm the God of your ancestors, and I'm the God of all those traditions. I'm the God of your belonging, of where you're rooted. But that's only one tiny piece. I'm more than all of that. I'm ever dynamic, ever growing. Just what you wish me to be, I'm that, and much more ever you'll never be able to understand. And if God had said, I'm just God, I'm El Shaddai, right? That's the name that God reveals to Abraham. Then at that point, the people would have thought, oh, we're just going back into the past. We're going back to what came before. We're going to be in the land of Canaan, living out the way we always had, our traditions, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But God was saying, yes, I want you to be rooted, but I'm also presenting you something that's going to be completely different than you have ever experienced or thought you've experienced. Because just as I am ever changing, that reflects a dynamic of what I hope for you and what the world is about too. And that you weren't just to return to Canaan and just continue to do what they've always done, but something new was to happen, eternally new. They were to receive the Torah, they were to enter the land in a completely new way, and it would never remain the same for long. It would be ever changing, ever dynamic. Even though Kohelet, even though Ecclesiastes says there is nothing new under the sun, well, on the other hand, every day is a completely new day. Everything is completely new. Every sun is completely new. It would be ever evolving. And they had to approach what was to come with that openness. And the chapter would be closed, and then a new one would be open. Now, I often think about this whenever we start a new book of the Torah, how every book of the Torah is completely new, completely different from the other. It's its own world. It evokes its own ideas. It evokes its own, because our tradition wants to keep us on our toes a little bit, not just to feel comfortable with everything being the same. Everything has new visions. And so this mirrors a really powerful way of being in the world. I think takes us to where we are right now, and to where Jews have one of the greatest secrets to our survival and to our flourishing has been holding on to these two things. And really what the world and we, part of what the world and we need right now, because we don't know what the world needs right now because we're in the middle of it too. But we have to have that sense of knowing where we come from, the God of our ancestors, and not to be settled in the customs and the traditions and the strength and power that gives us in the sense of knowing where we're coming from, our source. Because if you forget where you come from, then you just float and you make mistakes and you go to all kinds of strange places. On the other hand, we also have to be open. And it's harder in some ways to be open to the Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, the I will be that I will be, that vision of God in the universe. It's ever changing, ever evolving. Because you wonder, where do you find your base if everything is changing all the time? And yet that's what we have to hold on, that sense open to the unknown and to a new understanding, and that out of all of this, something we can't even imagine, a new vision of self for our lives, for our people, for Israel. And a few weeks ago, my father went out for dinner. He went out for dinner with Yossi Halevi, the commentator who will be speaking here on February 11th on the Zoom call. He said to me, one thing that he talked about was, in Israel, one thing that we know from all of this is that Israel is not going to be the same once the dust settles. And that's actually a powerful thought, because Israel had been in a stuck play for a long time. And so being open to that sense of ever evolving and being ready to take the plunge into that new identity, as for Israel, for the Jewish people, for our universe facing such difficult challenges. And so this has been the paradox of being Jews, holding on to tradition, trying to always be open to what comes. And it's embodied in the way we pray too. We pray in the Amidah, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob. But then what's the name, our name for God, a name we don't pronounce? It's Yud He Vav He, which is that I am, that I will be, pure being, that sense of infinity, of always changing. And so we're always holding on to both of those. It's maybe why we're all a little meshuggah. But it also gives us what we need to try and meet very difficult times. Because we also have a big exodus before us as the world, an exodus from everything we are mired in right now, and hoping that we can come to a new beginning that will be broader and more beautiful than we can even imagine. But in the meantime, what we have to do is keep holding on to our roots, to our belonging, to where we come from, and use the wisdom of generations, of millennia, and also our hearts and minds wide open, holding on to an unfolding vision that we cannot yet see, being willing to let go and to go wherever it takes us, heart, minds, and souls, with faith that will be a more wise and more joyful than we can imagine. Shabbat Shalom.